All right. Thank you, Pete. Hey, welcome to Fire Engineering's Hump Day Hangout and back to our show, Issues and Challenges in today's fire service. I'm Chief Rick Lasky, along with my good friend and Hump Day Hangout co-host, Louisville Assistant Chief Terry McGrath. And we have, well, we had planned to have the whole team with us today. We got Chief Scott Thompson from the County, Texas, and Chief John Salka, retired FDNY and Chief of South Blooming Grove, New York. Fire department with us. Chief Bobby Halton is not going to be with us. I think he's on his way to St. Louis. Larry Conley, one of our fellow instructors from FDIC, and a great guy and a captain. They lost a firefighter, as many of you know, in St. Louis in a line of duty the other day. And I think that might be, he's going out there to visit with him, might be for services. But yeah, I know Bobby doesn't want to miss that. So we wish Bobby safe travels, and our thoughts and prayers are with Larry and his crew. We've got another great show lined up for you today. As always, we always remind our viewers that if you have any questions, please make your way over to Twitter and send them our way. Our producer Pete will grab a hold of them. I might even notice some. Pete usually always beats me to it. We'll try and get to your questions as quickly as we can. Just make sure to add hashtag FE for Fire Engineering, FE Talk. Our topic today, and actually, before, how about this, guys? Before we get to our topic, we need to pay tribute. Scott, you want to take this? You're on mute, buddy. You're on mute, bud.
A very dear friend of all ours, especially Rick, passed away way back. Taught with Rick and Chief Salka and the Saving Our Own Get Out Alive program, and just a mentor to so many firemen. If you've ever heard Chief Lasky do his program, he talks about Tommy Cervino and his ownership of his saw. But man, just a really great guy. Passed away, and just a huge loss to the fire service, and just a sad day. But he's influenced so many people, and just great to be around. Treated everybody with respect, a real gentleman, and just a tough day. And Rick, very close to him, and so understandably, we're all very upset.
Sorry, I had to reset there. Thanks, Scott. I appreciate that. Tommy Cervino is what every firefighter should want to be like, every officer should want to be like, every chief should want to be like, every father, every husband, every grandfather. He loved his kids. Oh my God, loved his daughters, loved his wife and those grandkids. Man, oh man, did he love the fire service. And all he wanted to do was make a difference in people's lives. And golly, he did. And I not to get that too far down that path, but whenever I do, you're right, Scott, whenever I show that part of the presentation, pride and ownership, that was it. The whole my saw thing, my keynote. John, how many times in class does his name come up when you and I are teaching together?
I love that story. My saw. I love that story.
Oh, just him, man. Put the firefighter back in the firefighter, the firehouse back in the firehouse, man. And, no ego. I post this, no ego, no bullshit. God, he was just one of the hardest working people, was a high school teacher first, then an iron worker. I know all of us, we absolutely love and adore Tommy. And
Rick, the fireman that worked for him, Larry McCormick, Mike Rico, the McCaslins, I mean, really strong firemen were under his leadership. And just a real quick story about that with his daughters. You used to talk to Larry and Mike, and they would say they would do training. You'd always grab one of his daughter's dolls to be the victim. And so they always reported, I got the baby. And then when Mike had his rescue, that's what he said. I got the baby, because that's just how he always was engaging them. And just, man, just a huge influence to create that. That Oaklawn squad had a great reputation in that whole region. You know that better than anybody, but he was.
Well, and Scott, he brought Larry McCormick to FDIC to help out. And Larry became one of our instructors. And then a Downey Courage and Valor Award recipient, Carter Harrison, I believe, too, in the city for rescuing a firefighter. But Tommy's the kind of guy that if it was snowing, you couldn't go outside for that particular drill. All of a sudden, he walked in with milk crates. John, you remember you and I talked about this. He'd stick the milk crates on the kitchen table. He could never drive past a broken down abandoned building, would stop it and taking locks and doors. And everybody be sitting at the kitchen table. John, we talked about it when you did your K2 show. K-Tool, I mean, next thing you know, you're sitting at the kitchen table and everybody's got tools and doing stuff. Just absolutely amazing individual. And I know through everybody on this panel and all of our good friends, he'll be teaching in the fire service forever. We miss him. I absolutely love and adore him. So many funny stories. But Tommy, God bless you, buddy. Thank you for your friendship and for what you did for all of us. So, all right. So as we move on, what we want to talk about today is something. And I know, John, you just got back from vacation. I know we were touching base. We were gone. In New York City, we wanted to talk about the tragedy at 333 East 181st Street in the Bronx. And we kind of posted this talk about the chain of events that led to this horrible disaster and the heroics. And there was absolute heroics by the FDNY. Everybody always said, man, at this particular call, they're pretty brave. There are so many things that fell into place with the people that responded there. And I'll say this, we all say this all the time, firefighters all over the world would have stepped up and we go in and we do what we got to do. But the FDNY that we're talking about, this particular fire, was amazing. John and Terry and Scott, I'll throw it to you. But John, you were on 48 engine. You were on 48 as a captain. I want to say this, like, you were there during the majority of the war years. I mean, you guys they've never dipped under 6,000 runs a year, going to fires all day long. That was their first due assignment, that building, for you all those years as a captain, and then in the 18th Battalion, right?
No, not in the 18th Battalion.
Oh, not in 19th
19th Battalion box.
19th.
Yeah, that was the enemy battalion box. But when I was a captain of 48, that was my first due. I was in that building hundreds of times for jobs and little jobs and food on the stove and medical calls and everything else. It was such a unique and confusing. I shouldn't say confusing, because once you had it, once you looked at the building, once you've been in there, once you studied a little bit, it wasn't like a one visit thing that you could get it down, but it was difficult. There was like a public hall every 3 floors, and like you'd be walking down a hallway, then it'd be a little vestibule off the hallway, but only a door width wide. So you'd be walking down a hallway, all of a sudden you'd look, there'd be a door here, then a door facing it, and then a door facing that first door. 3 doors on the 3 little walls. And one of them went down, and one of them went straight in, and one of them went up. And that was the 3 apartments off that little vestibule. Then you go down the hall a little bit farther. And from the outside of the building, the actual fascia of the building, popped out every 3 floors too. It was a quite complex layout. I'm not quite sure. Somebody must have been shooting for some type of an architectural award or something. I'm not quite sure why people do that. Why they make things so confusing and difficult. Of course, nobody's ever expecting a fire or worrying about anybody finding an apartment. Everybody, eventually knows where their own apartment is. But it was quite difficult. And just like going down to any other fire, whether it's down in a basement or whether it's in a mall or anywhere else, a commercial building, going down to a fire is difficult. But that's not what the problem was. The problem with this fire was a very, very basic, simple problem. The door was left open. The door did not self-close. And you and I, all of us, travel around, we teach, we travel, you go to hotels, and most places they do close, but there are states and cities that don't even have self-closing rules and regulations. We open up the hotel door, hotel room, you walk in, you look back, and the door's still open. It's against the wall. And you're like, what's that about? And that really is what caused this whole thing to happen.
Well, and John, and I think I saw somewhere, I was doing a little bit of research. The building was nominated or did receive some awards for architectural design. And my first question is, because I want to ask Terry a question, Scott. Is this like a one-of-a-kind building in that area, or were there several, buildings, like sometimes they'll build like a block full of those or something similar? Was this kind of that one building? We always said, man, what one building would you ever want a job in? Well, that one, and that one would be difficult if we had one because of the makeup of the floors. Can you remember any other buildings? Like, was that the only one in that area kind of like that, or did they build like 3 on a block?
The one that I knew about. We had a lot of projects, but projects were just apartment houses. Go press number 3, get out on the 3rd floor, and all the apartments are on the hallway. 99% of the buildings are like that. This was a very, very unique individual kind of a building.
Well, so let's back up here for a second, because everybody on our team here, Chief Halton included, obviously Chief Halton's on his way to St. Louis. are big proponents of public education, fire prevention, and most of all, training. Terry, and then I'll throw this, Scott, after that, you got two fire departments where you're both chief officers at that are busy fire departments. It's not like, well, I wonder what time this year we're going to have a fire. You guys do fires all the time, whether it's in your own jurisdiction or your neighbors. And you guys have made rescues and you've had maydays, you've had all kinds of things occur there and stuff, busy place. But the success behind your department's firefight has come down to the training, the SOGs, and I think the kind of leadership you have where it's like, Scott, I saw you post it again. I love it. You posted in one of your classes about, here it is from the chief. You're either here to fight. We'll get into that. Hang on. I want you to explain that in a second. Terry, Louisville is successful. We've said this before because you guys bring a shitload of people to the call and a lot of water. You bring a lot of water, a lot of people. But besides that, instead of just, flooding the street with apparatus and people, you guys are heavy into training. You're heavy into to fire prevention, and you're heavy into a good, solid command presence, correct?
Yeah. And I first of all, I'll say that I think we're very good at responding with intention. And that's not just getting on the rig and going to a place, but you go there expecting, preparing, get off the rig on the way to the call, running through in your head, or the crews. Yeah. The crews talking to one another, the captain talking to his crews, or, and that's something that you instilled here, Chief, a long time ago. And that's, the whole deal of it's not out till we say it's out. There's no fire till we say there's no fire. There's no victims till we say there's no victims. All of those things, but it's built into a mindset. It's built into the intention every time we turn out of the station. The only other thing I'll add to what you just talked about, which was, key components of bringing a lot of people, go there with a mindset, get ready to work, be deliberate in your actions, move with purpose, all the little catchphrases we can say. But something else that I want to add to this, because we don't focus enough on it, and that's prevention. And that is inspections, that is good fire codes, that is, that rolls into pre-planning and understanding. Like Chief Salka to this day can tell you the nuances of that building. And I could tell you without beyond a shadow of a doubt that he knew exactly the challenges that he was going to face when he went to that address. And all of that, moves towards what your overall point is, Chief, which is that be here now. And when you're here, this is the most important thing. And when those tones go off, regardless of what you're going to, or what you think it might be, you be prepared for whatever it's going to be.
Well, and I know all three of us feel the same way. All four of us. I'm sorry, my math isn't the best today. Every time we go out the door, we're going to a fire, like you said, Terry. And that's what none of us in this group, in this team, have any patience whatsoever for anyone that rides a piece of fire apparatus that gets off without their gear on and without their tools in their hands. And John, I know how you feel about it, Scott, and you guys know I'll send them home. And Terry, Scott, I did it. It happens one time. Come back. I don't care. At a fire, you come on a corner. You have your shit with you. I don't know what you were thinking or what magic tricks you're good at, or what they told you on the radio. Go home, get out, go back to quarters and go back there and do something. How do you know that? I think it's pretty simple. Leave the guys alone. The guys and gals will kick ass for you. Train them, give them the equipment they need, give them the support, but you have to have a system in place of how you respond, what you do, expect fire, expect victims, don't get snookered, and off you go. And you have to have that. I just can't, John, we did a show on the clipboard fire chiefs, these guys that run their fires like they're literally reading off a clipboard, or they're like, you can hear the pages on the book as they're flipping, going, okay. And they ramble on the radio. Seriously, I'm like, why did you even say it? Well, who cares? And, it's like somebody pulls up when they say they have a comp roof. I was a roofer for a long time. What are you telling me by telling me you have a comp roof? I don't understand that. Give me a size up, get off the radio and go to work, and stop the nonsense of flipping through the pages and benchmarking this shit and all this stuff. And, let's get to work and let's get inside there. People are counting on it. So Terry, again, the whole group there embraced, get out the door, get out quickly, be dressed, get off the rig with a mission in mind, and that's to go to work. Scott, talk about. Oh, go ahead, John. Go ahead, John.
Before we go on, I just want to comment on what Terry said, because it's so important. You know, a lot of what happened at this fire, and sometimes other fires, but this fire in particular, just because of the way the building was designed and the way the people reacted, not us. You know, every firefighter could have done everything 100% right at this fire. I'm not saying there wouldn't have been any deaths, or there would have been exactly the same amount. Maybe there would, but the first thing I mentioned was the fact that the door was open. Whether that was a design error, whether that was the fact that this is a federal building built with federal funds, it was controlled by a different set of standards and codes than the New York City codes, which right off the bat is a very oddball thing, right? So the second thing is, a lot of folks died in the stairways. A lot of folks from above the fire, if they had sheltered in place, if they had stayed in their apartments, they probably would be alive today. So now we have two things that may have been victim caused or victim actions that contributed greatly to the deaths of most of these people. You know, the firefighters did some dramatic work there, and a lot of guys did some really special stuff that pulled some people out. Maybe it would have been twice the amount of people. But the point is, once the door's open or left open or not reported that it's not working properly, right? And then once people start coming down the stairs, now you think to yourself, gee, I've been in high-rise buildings before, and it always says, do not use the elevator, use the stairway for evacuation. So there's the sign in the elevator lobby saying, don't take the elevator during a fire, go down the stairs. These people went in the stairs and it cost them their lives. So public education and things like that are very important too. Like, people move into these buildings, I don't know if they're given any education. I don't know if they're given any training or given any instruction on what to do or what not to do, but certainly that could be done better as well. We can perform perfectly. And still, if people take some of the wrong actions and do some of the wrong things, you can end up with people dying in a fire. So I found that very interesting as well. The fact that most of the people that died in this fire died in the stairways, were found in the stairways, you know, either dead or unconscious and later died, which is that's a distressing thing. Matter of fact, it delayed some of the things from happening. Some firefighters were in the stairways trying to go and get to the floor above and do this and do that. And they ended up encountering victims, and, you know, they were very quickly overwhelmed by the number of people that needed help and the area that was, you know, contaminated by smoke, and suddenly people needed a lot of help. But I think we all have to remember, no matter how good or equipped or trained or well-trained your fire department is, sometimes there's things that happen that are not in our control, that are conducted and performed by other people at the scene that don't make things any better for us.
Well, we all like the program and the push out there for close the door. We've been saying it forever, you know, and trying to get residents to remember to close the door, give us a chance, close the door. And obviously, you know, through their investigation, they revealed, you know, that the door was left open, and that compromises everything. Scott, you know, I mean, we talked about this, and before we get to, like, you know, the apparatus responded and positioning, John, we want to talk about that for sure, because that made a difference with 27 truck, and then how you guys in New York City respond to that bill, your responses and stuff. Scott, talk briefly about, I love when you put it up there. It's a message that every one of us, you know, believes in and lives by. About, it's like I said, and granted, don't get me wrong, some of the chiefs that are out there with the clipboards are not bad guys or gals. They're, you know, the people that are sitting in their cars with the disco ball and the latte machine, and they're at the air conditioner and the heater while the gals are in there fighting the fire, are not bad people. That's what they were taught in some class somewhere. And just keep making the check marks, and you know, they're more worried about, is there an electrical hazard, you know, when they first pull up, rather than getting a line stretch and getting somebody in doing the search and all that stuff, getting somebody in the building and so on and so forth. I think some people complicate it. They complicate us into standing out on the front lawn. So go, Scott, talk about your thoughts and what you push out there.
Yeah. So, and I want to start off with a quote that, you know, the person well, but, you know, this was a career event. I think even for FDNY, John, you probably agree with that this is kind of bigger than the stuff typically you go to. And I, you know, you talk to these officers, they said, we'll figure it out when we get there. And that always drives me crazy. But back in October, when I was riding out with Rescue 3, Pete Lund told me something. We were sitting at the table. It was October. It was Wednesday. I say this in my class. And I was like, you know, man, what's this kid from Plano doing here? He stopped me. He said, Scott, he says, you have every opportunity to be a firefighter at the highest level in Plano, Texas, as I do in the South Bronx. It's just going to look a little different. And that always stuck with me. But, you know, this in Louisville in the Colony, this fire is, a 3-story hotel now with maybe 7 or 8 people, right, stretching our resources. But the thing you're referring to, and this was an actual deal, our sheriff here in Denton County, right after the shootings in Parkland, put out an email. I mean, this is a real deal to his officers. And it basically said, when we confront an active shooter, we're not going to hide behind a pillar. We're not going to wait for another agency. We're going to go in and do our job and save lives. If you have any problem with this, let me know and we'll have you reassigned. And so I wanted to have a little fun with, fire chiefs get mad at me. I hear back on this all the time. So I put them side by side. And I said, what does that look like in the fire service? And it's basically, hey, if you respond to a building fire with searchable space, we're going to go in and do our job. We're not going to wait on mutual aid. We're not going to hit it from the outside. We're going to go in and do our job and save lives. And then I say, if you have any problems following this, let me know. We'll have you reemployed. But, it makes perfectly clear what the expectation is. If we go to a building where there's the possibility of people trapped, but there's a lot out there who don't agree with that. But I think it's so important that our people understand what we expect them to do. I took advantage the next morning after that fire, when all this stuff was coming out. I sent an email to the organization because I think the men and women in the Colony were kind of looking for me to go, wow, how's the chief going to react to this? Is he going to say that was way too aggressive or that was acceptable? There was no question there were people trapped in that building. Absolutely none. You listen to the audio and they're and that's game day for us, right? That's when we have to be on our absolute best. And you can't be this anti-aggressive mode on 99 fires, on fire 100, kick it into gear and be a rock star. You use the Three Stooges versus the Blue Angels. So I just think, from a suburban fire department, even though this happened in FDNY, there's a ton of lessons there on preparedness and getting our mindset right. And, this is one of those once in a lifetime fires where we got to get it right the first time, because there's not going to be a lot of forgiveness.
Well, and you guys everybody just talked about the importance of prevention, public education, being prepared, and none of us advocate. In fact, I remember when, John, your last night in the Bronx, when I tell that story all the time, one of your firefighters who adores you said he referred to you as the safety Nazi. He said, he goes, you better have your gear on, you better have your tools. If he says you back out, you back out. If he says you go in. And this is a guy that said, I'd follow him to the gates of hell with nothing in my hands but a Halligan. Because when you hear his voice on the radio, when the 1A pulls up, things are going to get better. That's because they love his command, his leadership, his style, his aggressiveness. But none of us advocate throwing caution away. None of us advocate endangering. We talk aggressiveness because we prepare our people, we equip our people, we train our people both mentally and psychomotor wise. We met up here and with their skills. And whether it's this building, John, at 181st Street in the Bronx, or it's a single family dwelling, you pull up and nobody's telling you whether there's someone inside or not. You know what? There are people they could be in bed unconscious, and we're outside determining, I'm saying, and checking things off instead of taking our training and going, guys, we can make entry here. We can do this. We equip, we drove fire apparatus all the way here. We give our stuff on. This is where your training and your confidence, or at times lack of confidence, dictates the success of your attack. Go ahead, John.
And that's why what Scott said is so important. And you and I and the rest of this group and Terry and Bobby when he's around, and we all agree with it. I think we all have some similar beliefs. We don't have all identical beliefs, but we have some similar beliefs. And the first one is that's why the command element, that's why the chief, call him what you want. That's why the guy in charge, the gal in charge, whoever's standing out front, that's why that's so important, that they have a good philosophy and they're well-trained and they have experience. And number one, because Scott might push his people in a little bit farther maybe than I would at a fire, and it might be not quite as far in as you might at a fire. Everybody's different. There is no line. There is no line in the sand at firefighting. Different chiefs with different levels of experience and different training and different staffing and different kinds of buildings are probably going to do things a little bit differently. So that's one point. The second and more important point is, and I just wrote it down, what level of risk is acceptable? What level of risk is required? And I don't have the answer to that. The next fire I go to, I'll be able to answer at that fire. I'll be able to say, yep, chief, we keep going. Yep, get in there. Go, let's go. And you better know if you're a fire chief, meaning a field fire chief, a guy that's standing in front of a building, not somebody doing a budget back at quarters. I'm nothing against that guy, but you know, the guys that run fires, the guys that stand in front of a building, pushing people in, you better know that sometimes you have to push people into an unacceptable risk. You have to push people into a known higher risk than you're really comfortable doing. Yes or no? Does anybody agree with me on that one?
Absolutely.
There are times when somebody's going to say, my little boy just ran back in there. A fireman, my little boy just ran back in there 1 minute ago. As soon as you pulled around the corner, he ran back in looking for the dog. Somebody better come out of there with burned ears. Somebody better go in there and get that kid. Now, I know after 10 feet in, they might say, that's it, Billy. We can't make it. Back out. And that may happen. But there is no line. There is no universal safety line. There is no universal level of risk. It has to be determined at each individual incident, at each individual step of each individual incident. Different things are going to have to be adjusted. And that's the hard part of this job. And if there's somebody outside saying, okay, no, we're going to stop now, you know, like they better have a good reason for that. If, as Scott said, if it's an occupiable building, God forbid there's reported people trapped. Somebody standing next to you saying, my mother is in there. She hasn't left the house in 9 years. She's on the second floor. You better get some people in there. Of course, if it's not unbearable, if it's not fire out of a window, you know.
But you can't do this, right? You can't do this. And the FDNY couldn't do what they did at that fire without the training, without the attitude, without you know what I'm saying? There was brand new Proby firefighters there who got off that rig and they clicked and did their thing because they were working side by side with another firefighter who's been doing it, that works within a system that, again, you know, some of the safest people I know are in that. I'll pick on that department, FDNY. You know, some of the safest people I know. Yet, as safe as they are, they at times are extremely aggressive in a great way, and going after people and doing their job. And they're not coming out, you know, with injured firefighters all over the place, so forth. They take their training, they take their attitude, they have the command leadership behind them to do their jobs. And I think some people are out there, I think they're afraid to not check off the right box on the clipboard, or they're afraid to, you know, if they make a decision, you know, if I listened to a call the other night, and this chief gave out so many orders. He asked one company, are you thermal imaging it? I'm like, you just asked a truck company if they're using their TIC. And if you have to ask that shit on the radio, you have a serious problem with either your command leadership or the people working for you. If you're micromanaging every fire, and if people show up and they have to stand and go, I don't know, we have to wait to see what he wants us to do. And I use Jerry Wells as in John, you've heard me say it. Scott and Jerry came back after we had the apartment building fire Saturday. He was a newer BC, and he came back. He walked in my office. He goes, I think I've arrived. I go, why? He goes, this was the extent of my orders at that fire. I pulled up, I got it, I went, engine what? Oh, I go, it's pretty cool when they know what the hell they're supposed to do when they pull up, instead of you having to go, okay, no. Engine 14, you come over here and no, not that. So
there comes a level of, when you talk about all the things that we've listed, to be prepared to do this job, the training, taking it seriously, showing up, so there's a level of confidence that I think at a battalion chief's level, a chief officer's level, when you show up, you know who's, like, I know the captains on my trucks, and there's a level of confidence because they've instilled that confidence in me, because they are those guys that show up, take it seriously. When they go to calls, they're making good decisions. They're using their time wisely. They're very focused on our end user, on the customer, all of those important things. What you just talked about, Chief, and the lead in, the little audio that you have before your podcast, old school and the command post, there's a section in there of Chief Salka talking, and I laugh when I hear it, only because he's so casual in what he says. And the first time I heard it, it kind of caught me by surprise. But it's the small section in there, Chief Salka, where you say, I got somebody hanging off a fire escape with a baby or something, and you go, I need somebody up there. You're so casual in how you say that, which to a lot of people, that would absolutely throw you into the outer orbit of holy shit. But what I take from that is your guys know exactly what you expect from them, and they know exactly what's required. And all you're doing is bringing that little nugget of information to their attention, and they'll handle the rest. And that's what I take from that. I love listening to that because it's you almost make it sound so routine. It's not routine, but you make it sound so routine, but there's a comfort level in the group that's working that you're assigning, you're sending them to do a task, and you know in your mind exactly they're going to accomplish that.
Well, and John, how many times you said it? You would pull up in the Bronx, raging fire, or a little one, and he always does this. Scott Terry goes, yeah, I get out, I walk across the street, and I stand back and I watch my people go to work, and then he starts, throwing a few things like that out there, because in the 18th Battalion, they hit the ground running, man, and anybody around them. I mean, even though this fire was in the 19th, 48, 56, all those, John, are in your actual battalion. It's kind of weird how that
and Rick, and lots of other places too, lots of other departments all around the country. People know it. They know what they're doing. They do it over and over. They got a routine. They're well trained. As Terry just said, expectations are well known in both directions. Everybody knows what their firefighters can do, and the chiefs know what, and the firefighters know what the chiefs can do. That's the great part of familiarity. Everybody gets to know everybody and know exactly what to expect.
I just played that tape again, John, of that department real close to you, Scott, and Terry, battalion chief, well over 10 stations. Okay. Pulled up at a fire and ordered his truck crew to go to the roof at a house fire. He said, go to the roof and cut me a 4 foot by 4 foot hole on the leeward side of the roof. And I'm like, I really put the IFSTA book down. I just was, but anyway, all right. So John, let's talk about the response to this building. Let's talk about FDNY's response. You get a report of a fire in that building. What do you know? You run out the door in 48 engine. Who's all coming with you on the initial report of a fire at 333 East 181st Street?
So it's obviously 4856. Second due. I'm trying to remember now who's second due over there. But it's going to be 2 and 2. It's going to be 2 engines, 2 trucks, first due, second due, 1 armed battalion. You might not even get a third. You might not even get a third unit unless there's a second call. And if there was, and I'm sure there were second and third calls there, then you're going to get 3 and 2. And what's great about our dispatchers, what's great about our system that allows our dispatchers is our dispatchers can bump a call up. Civilian radio operators. They're not firefighters. They don't have helmets. They've never been on a fire ground. Some of them are volleys. Some of them got kids on the job. A radio dispatcher can bump it up to 4 engines, 3 trucks, a squad, and a rescue. I've been told by a civilian at the other end of a radio, Chief, I'm giving you 4 engines, 3 trucks, a squad, and a rescue. He decides to do that based on what he's hearing on the other end of the phone. I think that's fantastic. And there's places that would never, ever allow that, ever. And it's a shame, because who hears it better than the guy hearing the people screaming at the other end of the phone, right? You guys are going to work. This is a job. I'm sending the 4th engine. So I don't know what they sent on this box. I'm sure they had 3 and 2 going in. And if there were a lot of phone calls, they may have had 4 engines, 3 trucks, a squad, and rescue on the box.
And John, and I know when he pulled up, the officer of 48 engine, when he pulled up and gave his size up, he went with, I think it's a 1077, which is
1077 is a high-rise building. Yeah.
Yeah. High-rise building, which brought a whole bunch of stuff.
And it adds a lot more people to the assignment. Right.
Exactly.
And there was no fire visible in this place. The fire was visible out the rear. And this building has very good access in the front. Matter of fact, there's a pretty good picture that was on Facebook. I took a shot of it. Shows a couple of rigs in the front. Really fantastic ladder truck positioning. And you don't see the back because there is a back to the building, but it's inaccessible. The street goes up and it's around, and you can't drive back there. It's all just a pedestrian area. You couldn't get a rig back there if you wanted to. And that's where the fire was blowing out. That's what was really, really visible.
So that's important to know. That's important to know ahead of time, obviously. And how many times have we all said this? And I'll steal your line, John. The first time you see the inside of a building or the backside of a building shouldn't be
the day of the
fire.
There
for a fire. It should have been ahead of time. So get your asses out. Yes, I know you're going to burn up some fuel. Get out and pre-plan your still districts and know where you're going and what you're going to, instead of waiting until you get a call to get there. So they're bringing a ton of stuff. 3rd floor, it's a 19-story building, right? I think 120 apartments.
There was 10, 12, 15 stories above the fire floor.
And I know you said it before, with the high rises, as much as some people go, wow, look at it's almost at the top of the floor. Yeah, getting up there, all that. But when you get to the 2nd or 3rd from the roof floor, that's a lot less above you than all these floors you had here. I've heard, we've always talked about that. I've heard some of Eddie Enright, high rise guru, among other things in Chicago, said, man, I'll always take a top floor or near top floor fire in a high rise than lower, because all my problems are going up there instead of travel in
Well,
this
from
whole
a
building.
smoke perspective and smoke travel and victims being affected and how many people are above the fire, yes. On the other hand, what's better about a lower floor fire in a high-rise building? What's better about a lower floor fire than an upper floor fire? Pressure.
Well,
Pressure on a standpipe. You get a top floor, you get a 19-story building, get a fire on the 18th floor, you might have crappy standpipe pressure. You might have poor pressure coming out of that thing before your pumper gets connected and supplies the system. Versus you get a fire on the 3rd floor in an 18-story building, you don't even have to connect the pumper to that building. Now you're going to get tremendous pressure out of that thing. So there's advantages to both. And if the doors are all closed and people are doing what they're supposed to do, and the fire department is isolated, 19 stories above the fire sometimes they don't even leave. They're watching TV 4 floors above the fire in a high rise.
Well, which was a problem here because reading all the reports, you guys got so many alarms there, John, so many all day long that people it's like they turn the TV up. It's another alarm. Turn the TV up so they don't miss their program, and all of a sudden they've got a fire, and it kind of goes back to expect fire, expect victims. Well, expect shit not to go right. You turn the corner. Expect the door to be open. You want to be you want to be in there and go, hey, someone get their camera, John. Look at this room here. Look at the hallways gutted, or this occupancy's gutted, but digging out the hall. You know what I'm saying? You get in there and you're pleasantly surprised that they actually kept the door closed instead of the other way. You should always be expecting, right, the worst and hoping for the best. Go ahead, Scott. You have to. Oh, okay. I thought you had something. So now one of the things we've all talked about before is apparatus positioning, especially when you start jamming up around a building like this. We know we have a bunch of people coming. John, coincidentally, we just did a podcast on aerial ladder and tower ladder positioning. And you mentioned something the other day that just, man, it's like a gigantic gong, the gong. Somebody rang the gong when you said, I think you said for 27 Truck, which is a great company, did the chauffeur have to move because everybody's bailing trying to get in there to do their job, had to move, reposition a tower ladder so he could back. He actually backed in that wasn't that's like sidewalk with a bike rack next to it. He backed in,
I know he had to turn the rig around and literally back towards the building with it. And he had to get that Tonka truck out of the way, drive that thing out of the way. It was just blocking the way. Even a 95-foot tower ladder, still just a tower ladder. And it just doesn't have the versatility, just doesn't have the access for windows and removing people as an aerial ladder does. And he did a great job. He moved that tower ladder out of the way and then backed his rig in there. And another rig did some similar work. And they were able to pluck a lot of people out of windows with just the tip of that area. Yeah.
Well, we've talked about, Scott and Terry, we've talked about a bunch of times about especially aerial positioning. You see so many of these departments pull up and they just pull up, hit the air brake. They don't position it right. It's not turned away from the building. If it's a mid-mount, all this stuff we talked about, turntable, John, to the window so you can stick your ladder straight in instead of off to the side, and with buckets, with your doors being off the sides, you want to come at an angle, knowing your rig and know whether you have a quint or not. So John, for with Terry and Scott and I, obviously not having ever worked for the FDNY, but being out there a bunch of times, walk us through the response. You're responding for our viewers, okay? For our viewers that they may not have that building, but they may have another building that may present a lot of the same challenges. You're pulling up as the captain on 48 engine. Walk us through your size up and then your tasks with your crew, and then with the truck company, and then switch gears. You pull up, you're the 19th battalion, but start off with the engine first. You're turning the corner and you've got this fire. What are you thinking and what are you doing tactics wise and decision wise?
Well, what I do remember about that building is, as well as a bunch of other buildings, and I'm sure Scott and Terry have them as well. Once you get to high-rise buildings, whether this happens to be a project, but it doesn't really matter whether it's a project in a lower income neighborhood or whether it's a highfalutin apartment house somewhere in the nicest part of town. Depending on how they build them, again, design. We always had to remember what stairway we were going up, and the apartment number or letter would dictate that. So you always knew it was like A, B, C, D, E, F, G was you go up the A stairway, and H, I, J, K up to the other letter. You go up the B stairway. If you go up the wrong stairway, now you're going to connect to a standpipe that 3 lengths of hose is not going to reach the fire department, and that's just all there is to it. So the code allows for 3 lengths of hose to reach it, and if you go up the correct standpipe stairway, you're going to reach the proper apartment. So
well, let me interrupt for a second, John, because on the radio, the dispatcher asked if he asked the 19th or 48, or he asked somebody for their attack stairwell.
What's the attack stairway? You
he
got to put
wanted to
that
know
on the air. That's required to be on the air. So the first engine officer, this could be a BOP lieutenant, a guy that was a fireman 3 weeks ago, could be the lieutenant in the first engine. He's got to select the attack stairway. He's not standing around waiting for some chief to get there. Certainly the truck's not going to help him. So, and that's got to be on the radio right away. So the other incoming units know that, meaning on the department radio, not on the handy-talkie. They got to get that on the radio. Say, all units respond to box 3192. The attack stairway is the A stairway. So now everybody knows that. And then once we pick the attack stairway, then the other stairway becomes the evacuation stairway. And, certain things can't be done in each of those stairways. And I think you got to pick the right stairway.
And I think that's critical because you can't do it. I mean, you have to know which is your egress stairway and which is your attack stairwell. I mean, how do you, you're right. I mean, if you don't know that,
this was an easy one because we had fire coming out a window. We knew it was a working fire and we had an apartment number. Sometimes you get 5 calls at different apartments, smoke in the hallway, and it spans through the middle. And now you're not sure, gee, I wonder which side it's going to be on. We got 4 different apartments. And now you're going up looking for the fire, or the truck is, and sometimes that delays which stairway you're going to be in, or sometimes it causes you to commit to a stairway because you have something, and it turns out you're in the wrong stairway. Well, that works out good because the second due engine, where's the second due engine going to go? If 48 engine says the attack stairway is the A stairway, turns out it's not, but they don't figure it out till they're in the hallway with the hose line stretched already. Where's the second due engine going to go? Are they going to go to the A stairway, or are they going to go to another stairway? They're going to go to the A stairway. That's the attack stairway. Even if we end up wrong, second due engine is going to come, 3 more lengths of hose. We can put a 4th length on, and we can get that line in operation, even if it turns out we picked the wrong one.
So number one, I mean, one of our viewers threw a great comment out there and talked about assignments and the word discipline. And we've talked about the crews, the officers have to be disciplined, focused on the task. We've all talked plenty of times that when we deviate from the task, when engine crews don't fight fires, when truck crews don't vent or search, bad shit happens. John, how many times you hear me talk about Marty Wirtz, the lieutenant on engine 4, and Ray Hoff on tower ladder 10 at the Paxton Hotel fire? They made like 129 rescues via ladders and had, I think, 27 or 29 fatalities. He pulled up the video. I've got the video. There are people at it's a SRO, single room occupancy, E shape, reverse E, 3-story. People are at every window. There's bodies laying on the sidewalk, busted up. There's fire. People are screaming for them. He's the first engine. And what does he do? What does he do? What does he do, John? He stretches a line to the stair. He saved lives because he stayed on task. He got in, he stretched the line, got in and protected the stairwell. And Ray's crew went to work. They split inside, outside. When we don't stay on task, when we're not disciplined and focused on what we're supposed to be doing, that's how guys end up getting hurt and bad things happen. So back to Scott and Terry, John just said it. How important are your high-rise packs? If you don't know what you're carrying for a high-rise pack, a bundle pack, an apartment pack, whatever you call it, he just mentioned a bunch of things kind of like, well, 3. Well, if you don't know what the hell you're carrying and what your flows are and what your nozzles are, and what your PRVs are set at in your high-rises, well, what I'm saying? It's like you might as well carry an empty like suitcase with you without anything in it. The importance of knowing your high-rise packs and how to use them, even though some guys may not go to a high-rise fire in their whole career. They may not go to one, or they may go to a bunch. Even more so, I need to know what the hell's in that bag, how to lead out with it, where it hooks up, how many lengths, John, everything else. But Scott and Terry, or Scott, touch on that for a second.
Yeah. Well, even going back to what John said, though. So, firefighters want that. We go around the country, we talk, and I always talk about our choreographed deployment engines and trucks. But imagine if you don't have that. And what John said, that first in engine is waiting for a battalion chief to get there, and they don't address that attack stairwell, or they don't know, everybody's standing around waiting for one person to tell them what to do. That's a recipe for disaster. And I think chiefs fear that. They almost fear giving their guys that much leeway, but you got to have it. I mean, we're struggling with that right now. We're getting ready to get some high rises, and we're working through that. We're trying to, who's going to do all the things that John's talking about? And that's a huge jump in a suburban apartment when you're going from, the stuff we typically fight. We just brought Dave McGrath in for a week, and he went over all our things. And we brought Dennis Laguerre in so we can maximize these pumpers, but doing exactly that. Let's find out what the best attack packages are for our staffing and what we're going to bring. And then let's give everybody jobs so we can deploy and go to work and not wait on one person who's coming across town to tell everybody what to do. I don't know how you make that work. I don't even know what that looks like, but that's what a majority of the suburbs do, right? Hey, you do this, you do that. And then the fire's progressing this whole time and people are holding their breath.
Exactly. And we've talked about time is essential here. How quick you got out the door, how quick it all comes back to training, getting off the rig. As John said, you always say with purpose, get off the rig with purpose. And as our friends at Stockton would say, they work at a rapid pace. They don't run, they work at a rapid pace. And I think that's what you saw. So John, you talked about, all right, you pull up with the engine, switch gears. First due truck is thinking what? First due truck getting there.
First due truck is going to the fire floor. They're going to the apartment, 3B, 4B, whatever the number or letter or designation is. They're going there. Number one, to find the fire. Number two, to force entry if they have to. Number three, to see, to scout the route for the engine. They might say, we get, you got a bunch of stuff in the hallway, or it'd be easier to go up the other stairway, even though that one's closer, or it's venting out that window in that side direction. But pretty much the truck goes and confirms the fire location, starts a primary search, and gives that information to the engine so they're already underway, but so they can make sure, make it to the correct location.
And these guys were talking about trying to just get to the fire floor in the stairwell, crawling over bodies and people and trying to get there. It's one of those things, if you know it's that bad in the stairwell, it's going to be a lot worse in that hallway or the adjacent apartments or whatever. So talk about the truck companies outside. What are they thinking for exterior operations on this?
Obviously the truck companies our trucks are 6 people, which is wonderful, right? So we get a 3-person inside team, the boss and 2 firefighters, and then we get 3 people outside. We get the chauffeurs on the rigs, and they don't leave the rigs. We had a tragic fire 20 or 30 years ago. I can't remember. I think it was a young lieutenant, an assistant chief, a staff chief's kid got killed in a fire, vacant building, because the chauffeurs at that late stage of the fire geared up and went in to help their companies, and there was 2 rigs outside with no chauffeurs on them, and a guy showed up on an upper floor at the window in trouble, vacant building, fire out above his head, and he died. And he fell back in, and they never got him. Kane, I'll never forget it. But so our chauffeurs are pretty much screwed down to the turntable. There's always somebody out there, and I always made sure there was when I was outside. I always said, "Where's the chauffeur 33 or 56 or wherever it was?" And they could be on the ground doing something, but they got to be out there. But anyway, so that's the one guy outside. Then you got the OV in the roof, and it's different at high rise. In a 6-story tenement, the roof guy's going to the roof. The outside vent might be going with him if it's the top floor. It might be going to the rear to a fire escape. High-rise buildings different now. Now they're going to be working outside momentarily, but they're going to be going to the floors above too. They're going to be helping doing stuff on the floors above. So a high-rise building like this with 15 stories, 15 levels above the fire floor, that's where your outside people are going to end up there. And your chauffeur could end up hooking up with the OV in the front using a ladder, but it changes a little bit with fireproof buildings than it does with all the others.
You're the 19th Battalion and you're rolling to this fire and you get there, you hear 48 pull up, give their size up, and dispatch is already telling you, we all heard the radios. They're rattling off smoke or people trapped. Panic people in these apartments, smoke reported in these apartments. People.
Somebody reported, who I don't recall who reported, heavy fire out a rear window on the 3rd floor. Somebody reported that. Right.
So that being said, you're pulling up, you're the battalion chief. Talk to our chiefs out that are viewing this right now. What should they be thinking? If you were riding with the 19th Battalion and you're watching that chief, what are you observing? What are you watching as you're pulling up and you're that BC there, John?
Well, as we already said, and Scott and Terry said the same thing. If you got people with assignments and pretty much know what they're doing, if not exactly what they're doing, at least areas of responsibility, again, you don't have to worry too much about them because they should be knowing what they're doing when they go into a high rise or to a project or to a private dwelling. But you should be saying to yourself, more help, more help, more help, call more help. And I always called more help. I always, Chris DeLisio was one of my aides over the years. And, sometimes he'd get on radio and say, "Chief, additional engine truck." Yep. I always said additional engine truck. Always, always, always. If one line got stretched, I stretched 2. And if I had a fire, I always got additional engine and truck, no matter what they sent me. We already got 4-3 squad and rescue. You done? Additional engine truck. I always did it because I love to have 2 or 3 companies behind me, or at least on the way. Sometimes I'm waiting for them to get there. You need additional engine? Good. Get to the floor above or whatever. So as a chief, I know it's strategy rather than tactics for a chief, but sometimes you got to remember, I need more soldiers. We need more people here, especially for a high-rise building, probably 100 people above that fire.
Well, and again, we've been talking training, we've been talking fire prevention, public education, knowing your tools, being prepared, expect fire, expect the worst, expect victims. Um, you know, this particular fire, like we said, was in the Bronx, but there's all different kinds of configurations and places. We've seen stories from all over the country of people pulling up, and you know, for a rural department or a smaller suburban department, having 5 people trapped in a basement or 5 people in a house is their, that's their building in the Bronx there. You know what I'm saying? That's, I mean, so for those that are viewing this, don't get all hoodooed and hooked up saying, well, that was the Bronx. They've got all these people, they have 6-man, 6 people in the trucks and the engines, so on and so forth. The key in there is as John said it, and all of us, Scott, the Colony, Terry, the Louisville, we're always thinking big. We're always bringing extra people. We're always sending people home. We're always like, if I've said it forever, if you turn around and you don't have enough help there, shame on you. You should already had this plan ahead of time. You should already have enough help coming. You can always send them home. The common theme is you can't do squat if you don't have people to do it. And if you're sitting there waiting. So 2 or 3, I'm telling you, a baby or 2 people in a residence for a smaller apartment is their high rise. That's their building in the Bronx. You know what I'm saying, John? And Terry and Scott, you're right. They're pulling up and they've got maybe 3-person engines, some places 2, 3-person engines. And the second engine is maybe 7 minutes behind them or 8 minutes behind them. The truck's coming with 2 or 3 guys. They got mutual aid coming because they have 1 or 2 or 3 stations. They have to have that plan ahead of time. That could be, I mean, they're meeting the same challenges, that people, do at other fires, with more people kind of stuff. You know what I'm
The
saying?
scary places are the small departments, 5 stations, 6 stations, 8 stations. They're not small. They're decent sized departments. And they got 2 high-rise buildings. They got the old folks home and they get the courthouse or the court or the county building. And they don't pay too much attention to them because they only get 2 of them. Everybody's only been to 1 run at one of them, but then suddenly you get the job. Even if you have just 1 10-story building, 1 8-story building with standpipe in it, you better have a standpipe SOP. I don't know how a fire chief could run a fire department and not have that. And that should be like a quarterly drill or something. So people are at least familiar with, gee, where do we keep them rolled ups and all this other stuff happens? When you got 30 projects in your district, like 48 engine and 46 engine, they could do it in their sleep. They do it all the time. You know what I'm saying? But when you only got a couple of those buildings, you still got them, but they're not a big threat because there's not a lot of them and you don't get a lot of work in them. That sometimes becomes a challenge.
Well, and John, I don't think you guys expected to see the tragedy you did at the Deutsch building right next to 10 and 10's house, sat there forever after 9/11. And when they started dismantling it, you talk about all the time. The reason you guys do the BIs as much you do is because 2 firefighters got killed as they're dismantling because they went up there on a fire floor. These are guys that do high rises all the time. So, we face challenges everywhere we go. And I agree with you. I said it earlier. I hinted towards it. Scott and Terry jump in there that, we always remind our people, complacency is just a fancy word for laziness. You should be on your A game every single time you go out the door, and be ready to go to work with your tools, know your buildings. And that doesn't happen by sitting around, not training, not stretching hose, not carrying tools.
No, Eric.
Scott, did you have McGrath? Did you have McGrath out just recently?
Yeah.
Talk about the sharpest guy in town about high-rise buildings and standpipe operations and pressures and staffing and one of the points I know he made it. I don't even have to ask the question is, a high-rise residential building like the fire we're talking about here in the Bronx and a high-rise office building have nothing to do with each other other than you look up at both of them. They have nothing to do with each other. They're so different. Operations should be different. Tactics are different. Teams are different. Assignments are different. Even though everybody's like, oh yeah, high-rise building. No, high-rise residential, high-rise commercial. That's another whole snafu in the high-rise firefighting world that a lot of people don't even address. They're so different. And I'm sure McGrath touched on that.
He did. Yeah. And ours are residential right now. So that's what we focused on. But he did make that point, we've totally different.
Well, and again, Terry, go ahead. I mean, we talk about this all the time about good, solid SOGs and not just having them in a book somewhere, on a computer somewhere. You have to know what you're doing, how you're doing it. Everybody has a playbook. I've said this forever. Whether you like the NFL or not, whatever your stance is at football right now and politics and all that stuff, they practice all week long. They They practice the same plays over and over and over and hundreds, if not thousands of times. And they get out there and they still radio a play in, and he still looks at his little cheater SOG book, a lot of them on his arm, and they still huddle up and talk as a team. Without a playbook, that stuff don't happen. Without a game plan, that stuff don't happen. Without training, that doesn't happen. Go ahead, bud.
But you know, Rick, there's a whole group of chiefs out there, and you've heard them, that says, well, that takes away critical thinking, and you know, everybody really needs to be taught.
A lobotomy takes away critical thinking.
Yeah, but I mean, it's just ridiculous. The more that we can do to position our guys before the event, you know, that the advantage they're going to have. And there's so many things we can do, starting with going in the building and being familiar with it and all that. And then just saying, hey, if you're the first in engine, this is what you got to address. If you're the second in engine, you got to address this, and let them go to work.
And guys,
not everybody believes that.
Right. Go ahead, T.
So, you know, something else, and I think Chief Salka kind of hinted on this, but, you know, a jurisdiction like ours, we've got only a few buildings that we classify as a high rise. And so, you know, that's your low frequency, high risk, and you don't have the exposure, certainly the FDNY, which that is your everyday when you have a district like that. But we did this a few years back. Plano coordinated it, and it was a really, really, really good exercise that went on for, I don't know, Scott, a month or so, where Plano got a building. We brought in all the entities that realistically will go and support Plano or assist Plano in this type of activity. We don't do that enough, because I know for 100% certainty, Scott Thompson in the colony cannot fight a fire in that residential structure he's talking about. He's not doing it alone. So if we're only getting together, you know, that FDNY can bring in a ton of resources of people that are very, very familiar with those operations. And on top of that, their radios are unified, their policies are unified. But if Scott has that fire, or the Louisville has that fire, I'm getting the colony, I'm getting Carrollton, Flower Mound, Lake Cities. So now, in order for us to just mitigate it, I'm bringing in 6 other entities. Are we working together enough? Because that's a whole nother cluster F on an entirely different level. For
Terry, you remember they were bringing in 100 every night. That was their target number. 100 firefighters every time we did that drill is what they brought in.
Yep. And I'd like to see more of that. I think what just recently happened, the event we're talking about right here, should really emphasize to departments our size to let's step back and say, you know, we have to. It's like working at the airport. You know, how many times does a guy that drives an ARF truck go to a DC-10 that hits a water tank and explodes, right? So you may go 35 years, it never happened, but the day it does, you better know what the hell you're doing. You better know how to run the rig. You better know how to get out there and mitigate it. And that is just a matter of getting out there and practicing this.
I got a question for both Scott and Terry. So you have your district. Obviously, everybody's got their own district, but you'll have your fire department's district, the Louisville Fire Department district. The last house on the last street on the west side, the last house on the block that's in Louisville, the next house is in the next town, right? If there's a box, if there's a job at that house, is it only Louisville coming in?
No, so our farthest boxes, we actually add so we've got Highland Village on a corner, we've got Flower Mound on a corner. So yes, we do incorporate them or include them in that response. And you know, that's a whole nother topic for another deal, and a mindset of the service we're providing, and we got to get out of these silos and get rid of the barriers.
Because my son was down there in North Charleston, you know, and they're hooked up on that whole automatic response thing, Charleston and North Charleston and some other place this way. And he said he'd been to boxes where there was 3 engines from 3 different places, and the chief was from Charleston, and not even an issue. They're so used to doing it around the borders, around the edges, even a little ways in. Sometimes if there's another box out, all of a sudden another chief shows up from Charleston, and it's two engines from North Charleston, a truck from North Charleston, a truck from Charleston, and a chief from Charleston, and everybody's talking on the radio, same terminology, same everything, because they do it every day. So they got over that barrier. I mean, New York City doesn't do it. A house on the edge of New York City could burn down and nobody's coming except us. But lots of places don't have that ability because they don't have the resources. And everybody mixes up. The closer you get to the edges, the closest 3 engines, the closest 2 trucks, you could be driving by, going to the shops, and they pick you up on the radio and they bring you into that. So I don't agree with every aspect of those situations because sometimes there are difficulties there, but that's a great idea. And suddenly working with people next door and seeing the chief from the 4th Battalion in Charleston instead of the chief from the 9th Battalion in your own city becomes a routine thing now. You know the guy because you see him on, say like we talked about before. Once you start doing stuff routinely, whether it's assignments, whether it's how many people are coming, whether it's running drills at your high rise, once you start doing it, you know, if it doesn't happen by itself, then you make it happen. If you don't get a lot of runs in a high-rise building, then you got to do a lot of drills in them, you know?
Well, let me throw this to you guys here. How important is it? And we've talked over and over about this on other shows. Number one, that your SOGs work. Number two, I think this is important for the company officers as well. When the BCs are making their rounds, and they better be making their rounds, somebody needs to be sitting at a kitchen table over a cup of coffee going, okay, guys, let's give me a half hour, 45 minutes, which is, you know, it's going to go longer. Let's talk a fire in that building. Let's talk fire. What are we going to do and how are we going to do it and who's doing what first, who's coming, you know, those little tabletops that are so important. You know, Terry, you and I talked about it, you know, even like a trophy club, the coffee cup conversations over tactics is strategy. But where I'm going with this is I just can't rationalize. I can't wrap my arms around the fact when you get on a fire rig and you go to a call and you have no idea as a firefighter what you're going to do till you get there. You know, where now I know assignments change. You know, someone beats you in second or third, but you should be you should get in that jump seat going, okay, if we're first two, I'm doing this or doing this. If we're second, we're the first truck. You said it, John. That's why I said, what's the first truck do? What's the second truck do? What's the interior team do on Louisville Truck Company versus the OV versus the outside team? You know, what's the third do engine? You should be going, okay, it sounds like on the radio, we're going to be third. That means we're going to be RIT or whatever. It shouldn't be a freaking bag of marbles hits the ground. And you shouldn't have to have a battalion chief going, okay, I'm just saying the checklists and the talk, you know, that stuff, you know, your people should know what the hell they're doing. We've talked before, Scott. Once in a while, you got called audible. Once in a while, you go, no. Engine 2 got in ahead of you. They were at the grocery, you know, whatever. You know, you guys are doing this. Oh, okay, thanks, Chief. And
but more times than not, we're just going to work and it plays out, and it's a great practice. Get those sets and reps in, and it works, right? It works all the time.
Oh, I mean, and there are people out there that are so against that. They're so against a premeditated attack response plan. It's like, no, John, how many times we heard, you know, an ambulance pull up in a scene and they're calling a battalion chief, we got fire shown. Okay, I'll be there in 2 minutes. I'm almost there. And I'm like, why did those guys strike an extra alarm?
And I'm telling you, you know, everybody's not FDNY, and everything that FDNY does is not necessarily doable or acceptable in other places based on staffing and response times and apparatus and buildings and all sorts of variables. However, like Scott said, you know, these pre-planned assignments to some degree, to greater or lesser degrees, based on your staffing, right? I mean, an FDNY guy, an FDNY firefighter, which is 5 years on the job, working at 11 truck, he knows when a box comes in. He hears the box number. He knows what intersection he's going to already. He didn't even have to hear the address. When he hears the building, he knows that there's new law tenements over there, not old law tenements. He already knows to go to a new law tenement, which is maybe 2 stairways instead of a single stairway. If he's the OV, he knows where he's going in the rear, and he knows those buildings you can go in the front door right behind the engine, and when they go up the stairs, he can walk right past them and go out the back door. He knows what tools he's taking because they're on the side of the rig with him. He knows what tools he's taking all day long. Every run he goes to, he's taking those same 2 tools. He knows he's going up there. He knows who he's talking to on the radio. He knows 18 truckers on the floor above. He's an 11, 18's above. All those are known pieces of information. No questions asked. He doesn't have to say a word. Those are all things just going on in his head before he gets there. Obviously, when he gets there, it could be fire in this room or that room, but it's still a fire on the 3rd floor. And a lot of those things just pan out, like Scott just said. They just work out because everybody just shows up at the spot. You know, we had a guy, rest his soul, he's dead now. He's a great guy. He was a fireman in Rescue 3. And he worked one night and rescued. This is one of them screwball things. If rescue gets in ahead of the second truck, technically they're supposed to turn into the second truck. They're supposed to be the second truck. Second truck would argue that. But anyway, he went up. It was the tip of Manhattan now. 36 trucks, the most northern truck in Manhattan. They were first due. Rescue got in ahead of the second truck. And he was the roof man in a rescue, which is a whole different, forget the rescue. Those are different assignments. But the roof man in a truck is supposed to go, the book says, nothing shall deter the roof man from attaining a position on a roof. If you see somebody about to drop a baby, you tell them, hold on a second. See that guy come behind me? He's going to catch a baby. And you keep on going. I mean, that's an extreme example of it, and he didn't. He stopped and helped at a rescue. He stopped and went up a portable ladder with somebody else and didn't go to the roof that day. And I mean, it didn't cause any fatalities or anything, but guys all noticed it. And I'm telling you, from that day till the guy that day retired, if they mentioned it once, they mentioned it 5 times a week while checking a rig, coming back from another run. Oh, like the time you didn't make the roof. Remember that? Like that kind of internal pressure is always there. Everybody knows where they're supposed to be, and they know where everybody else is supposed to be. You know what I'm saying? And I'll tell you what, it works. It keeps everybody right on line when you know everybody else knows you're the roof man tonight too, and where you're supposed to be going. It's not just like throwing dice and go where you want to go and nobody even knows you're not supposed to be there, you know?
And we've said it before, firefighter, the fire service is chock full of some incredible men and women. All of our favorite people in life, you know what I'm saying? They're our favorite people. Let them do their jobs. I've always said it before, firefighters want to be led. They want policies, procedures, SOGs, rules and regulations, labor contracts, volunteer charge. They want this big book full of all this stuff, give it to them, tell them what to do, and then get the hell out of their way. But that doesn't happen when you've got chains on people like a dog in a junkyard. You know what I'm saying? Instead of letting them go and do their jobs and micromanaging and all that stuff, there's got to be a plan ahead of time. That's from your staffing to your response to what you have to do to make sure the right response, your tools, equipment, training, all the stuff we talked about, writing assignments, tasks, all that has to be done ahead of time. If it doesn't, it is the bag of marbles like hitting the ground. Let's go around closing comments. Terry, closing comments on this particular fire or something similar. Your thoughts for our viewers, buddy.
Well, I'll state the obvious, man. What a job and what a phenomenal response and you don't ever put the price tag or the quantify what didn't happen. And so the lives saved, I mean, the headlines are always going to read this many fatalities, this many injuries, or, whatever the case may be. But, in truth, that headline should read, 150 people saved, because that makes the deaths is what makes the something interesting to the general public and or at least in the news media's eyes, I guess. And so I want to emphasize that what a heck of a job. And I think I think it's a ringing endorsement of the fire service in general, the men and women every day that put these uniforms on, that show up and do a phenomenal job, and they do it because they're passionate and they care. And the men and women that sign up to do this and that put the investment in to truly be tradesmen and be masters of a craft. And I think that was on full display, like when Chief Salka was talking about, and you, Chief Lasky, talking about that truck placement and what they had to do to get that thing in the right place. And I just end this to say that I don't know how many people you say we saved this many people out of this building, and that's miraculous. And that truly should be the story here.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, whether it's the FDNY was absolutely heroic at this fire, what they did from a command position to the first 2 companies and all the arriving companies afterwards, to the investigators, to everything, was absolutely phenomenal. And we've all said this. You could take some of the smallest rural fire departments out there, some of the smallest suburban departments out there, and be equally impressed, because firefighters are pretty incredible people. They're, you're a firefighter. We talk about that. There's different levels of training, different levels of experience all over the world, all over the United States, all different things that affect it. But pretty commonplace to see firefighters do some pretty incredible things, no matter where they're at. But boy, oh boy, the FDNY was incredible at this fire. Scott, closing thoughts?
2 things.
You know what? Oh, I'm sorry. You said Scott. Go ahead, Scott. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, John. There's 2 things. First of all, there's lessons here. I know there's people that once they saw that pop up and say that was FDNY, they didn't look at it. That's not us. But there's lessons there for the smallest fire department and taking advantage of those. What does that look like in our city? And having that discussion. We talked about that. The other thing, I think every boss, whether it's what happened in New York, the deal with Danny Dwyer in Atlanta, the Station nightclub fire, it makes sense of that. Talk to your people and say, hey, this is an acceptable level of aggression. When you got confirmed people trapped, we're not talking about vacants and all those other things we talk about. We're going to go to work. And what does that look like? And making that really clear that says this is a career event and this is what we do what we do. And I think every boss needs to follow up with these and help their organization make sense of that. And I want to just close with this and tie that in because I mentioned St. Louis. That was a very tragic deal. But if you read, and I don't know how the guys from St. Louis feel about it, but I got to believe they feel pretty good. But that chief came on afterwards and said, yeah, this was a vacant building and said, but this is a dangerous job. And sometimes bad things happen in this job. We were ready. We weren't reckless. We did what firefighters do, and this one got the best of us. But that's such an important message on these things is make sense of it in your organization. So people aren't wondering, man, what would we be supported doing here? So I think there's a great opportunity in both those areas to learn from events like this for every fire department in America.
It's a great point, buddy. Great point. John, closing thoughts?
Yeah, so many unknowns. It's this is not construction. This is not heavy lifting with cranes. This is not somebody on a ship doing something, loading containers on or off a ship where there's an exact science there and they know what weight the crane will lift and how many containers they can lift and what the swinging, so that's true. And I wanted to touch on what Terry said, which is so important. And I think we started doing it a few years ago. I'm not quite sure where we are or where anybody else is, but it just annoys the crap out of me that we are so busy and so good at highlighting what's been lost and what's been damaged rather than what's been saved. Everybody else in the world takes credit for their own productivity, except us. You get a fire in the rear stockroom in a Home Depot, and you get there with a good well-trained fire department, pulls a 2.5-inch line, gets back there, pops that door, puts that fire out. You saved the whole Home Depot. You saved that $27 million building with that one hose line. And you should get credit for that. Yep, we saved the $27 million building that if we didn't show up, would have burned down. You save 5 lives or 10 lives. You remove 10 unconscious people that get revived and survive. We saved 10 lives at that building. Yeah, but 12 were lost, but we saved 10. A one-bedroom fire in a house, you save the whole house. If you don't arrive there and put that fire out, that house burns down. When a house burns down, nobody pays taxes on the property. And a commercial building, 25 people lose their jobs and stop paying taxes at home and move out of town. And we don't do it. And I can't believe the IAFF and all the other associated, all sorts of organizations, NFPA, anybody else making all sorts of standards and rules and minimums and on everything except the real important stuff for us like that. That's something that should be trumpeted every day. Everybody should have a PIO that tells everybody at every village board meeting, every city council meeting. And here's what the fire department saved in December. We saved 269 buildings, 325 lives, and 3 boats. And at the end of the year, somebody say, holy crap, you guys really save a lot of stuff all the time. We sure do. And all we talk about is the stuff we lose.
And some of the stuff we lose, we have no control over. The wheels are already in motion when we receive the alarm the majority of the times. Things are already happening. People are leaving doors open. Fires extending floors. People are doing stuff, prolonging calling 911 while they attempt to fight the fire themselves. All these things that we weren't going to change no matter what. Our job is to do, again, we already talked about public education and prevention, how important that role is. But when the alarm comes in, our job is to get there and minimize what's already happening and eliminate the source and the problem. You don't do that without good staffing. You don't do that without good policies. Again, you can be out in the middle of nowheresville. If you don't have good, solid SOGs, a good relationship with the departments around you, and we've said it umpteen times in the show, think big, think big, think big. You can always turn them around. Get your people coming. John, you said it for years. You can line the street with all the fire engines and ladder trucks you want. Ladder trucks and fire engines don't fight fires. Firefighters do.
That's right.
You got to get people there to do that. So hats off to the FDNY for an absolutely incredible job at an extremely challenging tragedy. A lot of lives lost, but a lot of people are alive today because of the heroic acts by those firefighters, just like happens all across the country. But this particular fire was incredible. So, hey, as we close things out here, Scott, if they want to get a hold of you, come on, do a program talk or whatever. I know you're filling up pretty quick, but if they want to reach out to you and talk about things, what's the best email?
ChiefJohnSalka@gmail.com.
All right. Chief John Salka at gmail.com. Scott?
Scott at fireserviceleadership.com.
All right. T?
T. McGrath at cityoflouisville.com.
And I'm
Hey,
Chief.
Ricky.
Go ahead.
Well, can I just do a real quick sales pitch? If you go to my website, I got 2 free things that I put out there. One is a mentor book that I give you a lot of credit in, and the other is a company level training document. And I'm trying to push it. But you go to fireserviceleadership.com, put a little information. It's free. I'm trying to get it in as many hands as I can. Don't give me any credit for it. Just don't turn a profit on it. But I just want to
Scott
make
is everywhere. Scott's everywhere. Facebook, you see him in pictures. He's got the tie on. He's out there teaching, man. You're doing great. You're doing great.
It's free stuff. It's free stuff. I want everybody to have it. Mentoring and company level training.
And your book is great too.
Thank you, sir.
Or again, Scott, where do they go to get that again?
Fireserviceleadership.com. Go to products. They got to put in a little information, but it's free. One is a lot of the mentoring stuff we started in Louisville, and then we talk about the big 5, the first 5, all that stuff is in there. And just want to get in as many hands as possible.
Perfect. The best-selling book, The Functional Fire Company.
Got them all right here. They're all right here.
Well, I'm at Chief Lasky at gmail.com. I want to thank our viewers for joining us again today, and thank our producer, Pete, for doing everything he does to pull this all together. We're all on Facebook and Twitter and all the different social media platforms you can find us. Our next show date is February 16th. We've got, this group has the third hump day, the third Wednesday of every month. There's always some great shows at this same time. It's some great podcasts in the evening. I'll just say this as we close things out. There's no reason to not be engaged, man. Back in the old days, there were a couple magazines out there. You had to get in a car and go drive to see John Salka teach. Nowadays, you have to work your ass off to not be interested in fire service. Between what you see on the internet, the webinars, the YouTube videos, the classes, the apps on your phone, everything that's out there. Scott's offering free stuff to why would you not take free stuff from Chief Scott Thompson? I'm just saying it's all out there. Get into the job, love the job, be the Tommy Shervino that Tommy was, is, and always will be as a firefighter, as a person, as an instructor, as a leader, as a brother, as a father and a husband. Tommy, we love you. We absolutely love you, buddy. You're going to make a difference forever. You'll be one of those that will always be making a difference. In closing, we always ask you to keep the men and women in our armed forces in your thoughts and prayers. And remember this, please, that never forgetting means just that, never forgetting. Be safe. God bless you. We'll catch you next time.